The knock at sundown. The sun bled red across the Wyoming plains, dying slow over a land that had already forgotten how to live. For Rhett Lawson, it was just another evening spent counting failures. The dry well, the empty barn, the cattle sold off for pennies, and the debts that still hung heavier than the sky. Once, Lawson Ranch stretched wide and proud. 400 acres of good grazing land his father had built with his bare hands. But the drought had come like a curse. No rain for 2 years, no mercy from the bank. Rhett had watched his dream crumble grain by grain until all that was left was dust and the echo of his wife's laughter, gone these 3 long years. He sat on the porch now, boots propped against the railing, watching the wind drag tumbleweed through the yard. The air was dry enough to choke a prayer. He had stopped praying months ago. Then, a sound. Not the wind. Not the groan of old wood. It was a knock. Rhett frowned and turned toward the gate. Out there, half silhouetted by the dying light, stood a figure, small, slight, clutching something to her chest. Behind her, a wagon leaned to one side, and inside it, movement. Small shapes. Children. He rose slowly, dusting off his jeans, and stepped forward. "Evenin'," he called, his voice gravel-rough. "You lost, ma'am." The woman hesitated, bonnet pulled low. "No, sir," she said softly. "Just nowhere left to go." As she stepped closer, Rhett could see the truth of it. A single mother, thin and road-worn, with 5 children huddled behind her. The oldest couldn't be more than 12. The youngest clung to her skirt, his cheeks hollow from hunger. Their clothes were patched, their wagon cracked, and their eyes spoke of miles and miles of empty road. Rhett cleared his throat. "You passed through Dry Creek?" "Yes, sir," she said. "But they turned us away. Said they had mouths enough to feed." He looked at the sky, at the land he'd stopped believing in. His farm had nothing left, yet somehow the sight of those children made him feel like he still had more than they did. "You can stay in the barn tonight," he muttered. "Ain't much, but the roof's dry." The woman blinked, surprised. "We don't have money, Mr. Lawson." "Rhett Lawson," he said. "Didn't ask for payment." She nodded gratefully. "I'm Evelyn Carter." "Thank you." That night, Rhett tried to sleep, but the sound of children's laughter, faint and unfamiliar, drifted through the window. It was the first laughter he'd heard on this land since his wife, Anna, passed. He turned his face to the wall, heart heavy with something he didn't want to name. Before dawn, he woke to the smell of corn cakes frying. When he came to the kitchen, Evelyn stood barefoot by the stove, her youngest on her hip, the others eating quietly at the table. "You found food?" he asked, surprised. She smiled slightly. "You had cornmeal and a few eggs. I figured it best not to let them go bad." Rhett stared. No one had cooked in this house in years. "You didn't have to," he muttered. "I know," she said gently, "but you didn't have to let us stay either." The simplicity of her words silenced him. Over the next few days, the wagon stayed. Rhett told himself it was temporary. She needed rest, the kids needed food, but the house began to change. The silence softened. The porch no longer felt like a grave. Evelyn washed curtains that had hung gray for years. The children fetched water, helped mend the fence, even sang while working. It was as if her presence had brought life back to dead soil. Still, Rhett kept his distance. His wife's ghost was carved too deep in him to risk feeling again. But every time Evelyn looked at him with those tired, steady eyes, the walls inside him cracked a little more. On the 5th evening, Rhett found her sitting alone by the corral. The sunset painted the sky in blood and gold. She held a small locket, worn and cracked. "That your husband?" Rhett asked quietly. She nodded. He was a miner. The mountain took him. I thought maybe the West could give us something new. Her voice trembled. But the world doesn't have much use for widows with 5 children. Rhett looked out toward the dying horizon. World don't have much use for broken men either. Their eyes met, both understanding more in silence than words could hold. When Rhett stood to go, Evelyn asked, Mr. Lawson, why'd you help us? He hesitated, then said softly, Guess I was tired of hearing the wind talk back. And for the first time in years, he smiled, small, fleeting, but real. Where hope took root. Weeks passed. The dry season deepened, but inside Lawson Ranch, something began to grow that no drought could touch. Evelyn started a small garden behind the house, a miracle patch of green sprouting from cracked dirt. The children tended it every morning, hauling water in tin pails, giggling as they worked. Rhett tried to hide his smile every time he passed by. One morning, as he fixed the barn roof, he called down, You sure that garden's gonna take? Evelyn shaded her eyes, looking up at him. If you plant with faith, Mr. Lawson, even dust can bloom. Faith, he said with a half-smile. Ain't had much of that lately. Then borrow mine, she replied simply. That line, borrow mine, stuck with him all day. But the land had a cruel way of testing the hopeful. One afternoon, a rider appeared on the ridge, Mr. Burnell, the town banker. He dismounted with a letter in hand and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Afternoon, Lawson, he said. I came for the payment you missed. Rhett's jaw tightened. You'll get your money when I get rain. Then I suppose I'll take your land instead, Burnell said, handing him the notice. Auction's set for the end of the month. Evelyn, standing in the doorway, heard every word. When Burnell rode away, Rhett crumpled the paper in his fist. Evelyn stepped closer. How much do you owe? More than a widow with 5 kids can spare, he said bitterly. Don't worry, I'll figure something. You don't have to carry it alone, she said softly. I've carried worse. She looked at him for a long time. Maybe that's why you're tired, Rhett. Because no one's ever carried you. That night, after the children were asleep, they talked under the stars. About dreams, about loss, about the kind of faith that doesn't come from churches but from the people who refuse to give up. Rhett told her about his wife, about the years since. Evelyn listened, not with pity, but understanding. By the time dawn broke, something had shifted between them, unspoken, fragile, and real. Over the next weeks, they worked side by side. Evelyn took sewing work from town. The children helped Rhett round up strays. Slowly, coin by coin, they gathered enough to buy feed and pay a portion of the debt. But fate wasn't done testing them. A storm rolled in one night, dry lightning and fire. Flames tore through the far pasture, and Rhett ran into the smoke with a wet sack over his face. Evelyn followed, refusing to stay behind. Together they fought the fire till dawn, hands blistered, clothes soaked in ash. When it was over, the barn was half burned, the fields black, but the house stood, and so did they. As the morning sun rose over the ruined land, Evelyn turned to him, tears cutting lines through soot. It's all gone, she whispered. Rhett took her hand. Not all. You and them kids, you're still here. That's more than I had before you knocked on my door. Her fingers tightened around his. Rhett. He looked into her eyes, dusty gold in the morning light. You made this place alive again, Evelyn. You made me alive again. And before fear could stop him, he kissed her, slow, gentle, tasting of smoke and salvation. The world around them was still half ash, but somehow It felt like the first day of spring. Months later, Lawson Ranch began to heal. The townsfolk, moved by their courage, came to help rebuild. Mr. Burnell, faced with the town's pressure, forgave part of the debt. Rain finally came, soft and steady, soaking into the thirsty earth. The garden bloomed. The fields turned green. And the sound of laughter, children's laughter, became the ranch's new heartbeat. On a golden evening, Rhett and Evelyn sat on the porch. The children played in the yard, chasing fireflies. Evelyn leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever wish things had gone differently?" she asked softly. Rhett watched the horizon. Green now, not gray. "Used to. But if they had, I reckon I'd still be sittin' here with nothin' but dust." She smiled. "And now?" He turned to her, eyes warm and sure. "Now I've got a home, a family, and a reason to keep fightin'." As the last light faded, rain began to fall again, soft, warm, and full of promise. Rhett lifted his face to the sky and whispered, "Guess even heaven decided we'd earned it." And inside that weathered old house, with the scent of rain and love mingling in the air, a man who once had nothing finally found everything.